Okay, so we're going to learn how to fix mistakes. Most of the common mistakes that happen in your knitting, we're going to go over today. So if you ever took this out of your knitting bag, it looked like that, you probably would not be very happy. But by the end of today, you're going to know exactly what to do and how to fix all of these mistakes and make it back to perfectly new. So, okay, so if we want to maybe change the view to my hands, and then we'll go ahead and get started with the demonstrations. This is a little practice swatch that I made.
The mistake.
Okay, so this is a practice swatch that I made with all these mistakes in it on purpose so that I could show you what some mistakes look like. This one here, right here, if you can get it to focus on that, is, see this stitch here, how it looks bigger than other ones? That's because on the back, that didn't get knitted. It just got slipped over. So that's one mistake you can make. And then right here is a twisted stitch.
Darren, can you hold it just a little bit farther down? Or sorry, closer to you.
Closer.
Yeah, that's a little bit more in the center of the frame. Thank you.
So that one right there is the big stitch that got slipped, and that's why it doesn't look right. That is a twisted stitch, and you can tell it's twisted because see this stitch, if you kind of pull on it, you can see how the legs of the stitch aren't crossed. And right here, that one, the legs of that stitch are crossed over. So that's how you can tell that it's a twisted stitch. And then right here, we have some purl bumps on the wrong side. So that's a common mistake. And then of course, these drop stitches. So let's get busy and see if we can't figure out how to get these things under control. So sometimes when you make a mistake, the easiest way to fix it is to just unknit your work and to just go back. So if you're making a little scarf or a swatch like this, and you made a mistake like back here in the same row, or maybe just one row back and you don't have a lot of stitches, one way to fix that is to just unknit. So unknitting is a way to take your stitches apart without taking them off of your needle, because that can be very scary to take them off your needle. So when you unknit, you want to hold your work the same way you held it when you knitted it. So when I finish knitting this, my left hand needle is empty and my right hand needle has all the stitches. And you look at your work and you realize, oh, I've made some mistakes. So the natural tendency to, when you unknit, is to try to turn it around and unknit it the same direction, like to turn it like this and to unknit it like this, but that's not the way to do it. So you hold it like this, and then if you pull your working yarn, you can see how it opens up that stitch right beneath, and that is what we want to look for. And then you take your left hand needle and you insert the left hand needle in that little window, and then you unknit. And when you do it correctly, you don't twist your stitches, and then you don't have any drop stitches. So if you hold right under the stitch and pull that working yarn, yeah.
Can you just pull the work closer to yourself? It's towards the top of the view for us. There we go. That's a little more centered.
Okay. So hold right under your work, under that stitch, pull your working yarn, and then you can see how it opens up that window. And then always go front to back. And then you just kind of unstitch, unknit one stitch at a time. So that's unknitting. And this is a way you can go back and fix mistakes if they're not too far back. If you were knitting a baby blanket and had 300 stitches, you wouldn't want to unknit 2 or 3 rows because that would take forever. So this way, you can just kind of go back 1 or 2 rows on a small project and fix mistakes. So that's unknitting. So just remember to open up that little window by pulling, putting tension on the bottom of that stitch, working opening your working yarn and take it right through, always front to back. That comes in very handy. If you have to do that. All right, so now I'm going to show you how to pick up a drop stitch. So if that happens and it unravels, so you wouldn't do this on purpose, but sometimes if you drop a stitch and it unravels, you feel like, you know, you're in a big mess. Like, how do you fix something like that? Let's see if I can zoom in. It won't let me zoom in. Pick this up and do it a little harder. So if you were fixing a drop stitch like this, I recommend you lay it flat on the table to do your work because it's much easier. But I'm going to pick this up so I can bring it closer to the lens. So what you do is you find your lowest, this loop, this active loop right here. And you would want to put a stitch marker on there just so it doesn't drop any more stitches before, if you don't have time to fix it right away. But when it comes time to fix it, for a knit stitch, you take a crochet hook and you go right through that active loop. And then you want one of these rungs of this ladder or these bars between, and you don't want to skip one. It's real easy to kind of skip this one on the bottom, but you want to make sure that you're looking at all of them. Don't skip any. And with your crochet hook, you're just going to hook that right back through. So you pick up that bar and then you pull it right through that loop. So it's good to have a crochet hook handy when you're knitting. Okay, so that's picking up a dropped stitch. Usually if you have a drop stitch, it usually happens when you put your work in your knitting bag and then take it out and it kind of slipped off the end. And then you put it on the needle. And then when you put this stitch on the needle, there's an opportunity here to make a mistake because you could twist that stitch. So how do you tell if a stitch is twisted? That's another good thing to know. So when you go to knit a stitch normally, see, I just dropped that stitch. Good thing I know how to fix it. So when you knit a stitch normally and you enter the stitch through here, it usually feels like nice and open and it's easy to knit that stitch. And if you kind of put your finger right there, you can see how it kind of opens up for you. But I'm going to twist this stitch on purpose to show you what it looks like. And when you do this in real life, you'll be able to tell the difference between how it feels. So when you look at that stitch, you can see how the back leg is actually pulled over in front of that leg. So that's going to be a twisted stitch. And when you try to enter that stitch, it feels very tight. So if you're ever knitting and your stitch feels very tight, chances are it could be a twisted stitch. If you look at it from this side, it's much looser. So if it feels very tight when you do it correctly, but it feels loose if you're doing it the wrong way, you probably have a twisted stitch. And what you can do is you can just go ahead and knit that through the back loop and it'll untwist it. But I recommend that you take it off and kind of look at it. You can see how it is actually twisted. So if you untwist it, you can see how the two legs of the stitch go straight down like that. And when it's twisted, the legs of the stitch are actually crossed. So that's how you tell. And then you put that back on, not splitting any yarn. And that's how you tell if you have a twisted stitch. Ways that you get a twisted stitch would be if you put the stitch back on incorrectly. If you knit through the back loop, you're going to twist the stitch. Or if you wrap the yarn the wrong way, you can get a twisted stitch. So these are all ways you can get a twisted stitch. But they're very easy to fix. Okay? And then just like that. So perfect. So So we picked up the drop stitch on the knit side. I also want to show you how to pick up a drop stitch from the purl side. So let's look at it from this side. And normally, if I was knitting stockinette stitch, instead of picking purl stitches up like this, I would just turn it over and pick them up from the knit side because it's much easier. But if you're working on garter stitch or seed stitch or something like that, you don't want to have to keep turning your work over. So you want to know how to pick up a purl. So I'm going to demonstrate that right now. So here are your ladders that have dropped. So you need to pick these up. Find your active loop on the bottom. So now on this side, it's not so easy to skip one of these. So you're going to see these pretty clearly. When we pick up a knit stitch, we enter the stitch this direction. But when we do a purl stitch, we enter the stitch differently. So when we fix a purl stitch, we also have to enter the stitch differently. So you enter the stitch this direction. So you go under those bars, entering it from the top. So all of the bars are going to be laying on your crochet hook. You go through that loop. So you have that loop on your crochet hook. So what you want to do is give yourself a lot of neck with this crochet hook. You want to make sure you're giving yourself room to work. The first bar you need to pick up, it leapfrogs over your active loop. And then you're going to take a hold of your active loop, and then you're going to pull that back through the purl stitch. And now you've picked it up. So once you're right here, what you have to do is give yourself room to work. So give yourself a lot of neck right there. With your finger, take that purl stitch you need to pick up, that bar. It leapfrogs over your active loop. And then you have to hold that active loop so that you can pull that purl stitch back through. Okay, and then you've picked up that stitch. Now, when beginners are trying this, you might try it for your first time. The common mistake is that you kind of hold your crochet hook right there. And then you remember, okay, I have to jump over, but then you don't know what to do. So make sure the most important thing you have to remember is that you're giving yourself a place to work. So you have to have a lot of neck here. You jump over the active stitch, and then you have to hold that active stitch so that you can pull your loop right through that. Give yourself a lot of neck, leapfrog over, I'm gonna hold that in place, leapfrog over, and then pull it back through. And then you want to put that on your knitting needle before any more stitches drop. And then you'd want to check and make sure if it's twisted or not before you knit that. That one seems right. So when you enter a purl stitch, you go this direction, and you can see it's not twisted. So sometimes it's tricky to tell if a stitch is twisted or not, but that one's not twisted because the legs go straight down. I'm going to twist it. So now I'm going to enter the stitch to do a purl, and you can see that it is twisted. So we're going to untwist that. So that's picking up a stitch on the knit side and the purl side. And we looked at what a twisted stitch looks like. Any questions about, if you want to see those again?
If you can get to the end of the row, we did have a question about unknitting on the edge stitch.
Okay,
sometimes I think that's a little bit trickier since it's kind of twisted and loosey-goosey.
Absolutely. So let's continue unknitting. So pull your working yarn to open that window. So open up that window. Just kind of follow your working yarn through it as well, is one way you can do it. So you can see your working yarn is going through there. So you're going to follow it, always going front to back. Okay, so here's the edge stitch. And the edge stitches are always a bit tricky because they do curl. And I'll show you a couple of ways you can do it. So you can just find that stitch, kind of open it up, tease it open with your fingers if you need to, and just go straight through and do that, and make sure you get everything situated right back on there. Let me show you the easiest way though for the edge stitch, how I would do it. Let me re-knit this so that we can show you. How I would do an edge stitch, and because you know how to fix a drop stitch and everything, it's not quite so scary now. I would probably just go ahead and take my needle out, reveal that edge stitch, and put it on. But now I've actually dropped it and went down one too far. So let me show you how to fix an edge stitch if you have that problem. So let me show you. What happens if, instead of dropping a stitch in the middle of your work, what happens if that edge stitch drops off your needle and it tends to fall and unravel like that? How's that make you feel? That looks like a big mess, doesn't it? So one of the mistakes, I'm going to show you how to do it wrong first, because this is how most new knitters think, oh, I know how to pick up a drop stitch, so I'm just going to pick it up like normal. So you find that bottom loop, and then if you do it like this, just pick it up like you normally would a drop stitch, then something doesn't look quite right, right? It's not right. So let's see how we can fix that. All right, so let's unravel it again. Okay. So the thing you have to remember when you are looking at your edge stitches is that these loops actually belong to two rows. So it comes out of this row, goes back around, and then it goes into this row. So each one of these loops actually represents two stitches. So that's why you can't just pick them up like a normal drop stitch. So you have to pick each one of those loops up twice. And again, I would definitely recommend when you're doing this, put it on the table flat to do it, but because my camera won't seem to let me zoom in, it usually does, but I'm gonna pick it up and hold it in my hand for you so that you can see it, but don't do it like this when you're doing it at home. So what you want to do is find that active loop. You want to put your crochet hook in. And then I recommend kind of putting your finger in that loop so that you keep track of both sides of it. And then you pick up one part of it. And then you pick up the top part of it. So I picked up that loop twice. So then you find your next loop. You can put your finger in that loop to kind of keep track of both sides. And then you pick up the one part of it. And then you pick up the other part of that loop. Okay, so I'm going to lay this down on the table now. Might actually be easier for you to see how I'm doing it. If this makes sense. So there's the loop. Put your finger in that loop to kind of keep track of it. Pick up bottom part of the loop and then the top part of the loop. And then here's my working yarn. So I'm just going to pick up my working yarn and put it back on. And then sometimes it looks a little wonky, but it usually will sort itself out. The tension will even out after you've worked with it for a little bit. Knitting tension wants to be even, and even if it's not even, it kind of evens out with a little bit of time on its own. So let me demonstrate this one more time. We've got these loops. I have 1, 2, 3 I have to fix, but it's really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows that are involved. So pick up the bottom loop, and then pick up the top loop. Pick up the bottom loop, pick up the top of that loop. Pick up the bottom of that loop, and then pick up the top of that loop. And then put it back on your needle, trying not to twist it. And then after you know, just from being moved around and jiggled around, that tension will all even out by the time you're finished your project. And if not, you can block your work and it'll even it out then, okay? Any questions about the edge stitch or picking up a dropped knit or a dropped purl? Were you able to see what I was doing all right?
Yes, you were psychic and answered someone's question about picking up the dropped edge stitch before I even had a chance to tell you that. We did have a request, and since you're at the end of the row, to see how to unknit from the purl side when you're working in stockinette.
Perfect. All right, so again, you always want to make sure that you are holding your work the same direction as when you would have created your purls. So if you just finished a purl row, your left-hand needle would be empty. You moved all your stitches over to your right-hand side. You're looking at your work to see what you did, and there's some kind of a weird mistake. So we're going to unknit the purl side. So it's pretty much the same thing. You hold on to your work right under the stitch that you're going to unknit, kind of hold it there, pull your working yarn, and you can see it opens up that window. And even on the purl side, you always go front to back. So you go front to back through that window, and that is actually the stitch below, and so you're going to unpurl that stitch. Hold your finger right under the stitch you want to unknit, pull your working yarn, it creates that little window. You don't want to stretch your work too much, you could distort it a bit, so just be gentle with it. Take the needle out, position your yarn. Go. Hold your work right under the stitch you want to unknit, and then when you pull your working yarn, it creates that little window. And it's a bit fiddly. It's a bit, you know, it takes a little bit to get used to. So if you do this and it doesn't seem supernatural, if it doesn't seem like it's something natural in your hand, you know, it just takes practice. But you don't usually have to do this very often. Okay? Does that make sense how to undo a purl? Just remember, you always take your needle front to back, and when you're unknitting from the right side to the left side. When you knit from the left to the right. When you unknit from the right back to the left. And you won't have twisted stitches. All right. How's that? Good?
That's good, yes.
Okay.
I was going to say, we're about halfway through now, but we did have a request real quick one more time to show how to pick up a knit stitch from the knit side.
Quickly. I don't want to do two together. It will take too much time. We need to get some other things. All right. So this is actually pretty easy. It looks like magic, I know, and it probably doesn't look very easy. But when you go to do it, it's actually pretty easy. So you want to find that active loop right here. And then you put your needle right through there, your crochet hook. And you want to make sure that you're picking up the one on the bottom. Sometimes it'll hide and it's kind of easy to skip it. But you want to make sure you're not skipping the one on the bottom. And all you do is you pick up that loop on your hook and you just kind of pull it back through your active loop. Pick up the rung of the ladder or the bar, and then you just pull it right back through. Pick up the rung of the ladder, back through, and then put this on your needle, and then you're ready to go. Okay. So let's move on to this. So I'm going to show you how to pick up a dropped stitch on garter stitch. And so that would be the same thing if you were doing seed stitch or other types of fabric where you alternate between knits and purls. So I'm going to go ahead and unknit a couple of stitches to kind of get to the middle. Get a couple of stitches in. Okay. So nobody likes doing this. This is one of my least favorite things. I always feel like I'm going to do it wrong. And if you do it wrong, guess what? You can just fix it. So it's not the end of the world. So you took your knitting out of your knitting bag and that's what you found. So you're not very happy about that. So you have knits and purls that you have to pick up. And one useful tool to have is this double-ended crochet hook. And this is used for doing Tunisian crochet in the round, which I do not know how to do, so I will not be speaking to that today. But this tool comes in very handy for knitting as well. So to pick up your purl stitches, remember you have to enter the stitch this direction. But to pick up your knit stitches, you have to enter the stitch this direction. So that's why the double-ended one comes in handy. So I'm going to go ahead and enter my stitches this direction. Find your loop first, find my active loop. Yeah, my cat decided he wants to help. He's very interested today. All right, so once you've inserted your crochet hook and you've saved that active loop, you've kind of divided your stitches in up. So the ones that are on top are my purl stitches, and the ones that are on the bottom are the knit stitches. So you're going to be picking them up alternately. And if you look, this right here is a purl ridge. So these are purls, and you can see the stitch that I'm going through looks like it's coming right off of that purl ridge. So the next stitch that I'm going to be picking up should be a knit. So you want to pick up that knit stitch, just like normal. And then we're going to change position. So we're going to use our double-ended crochet hook, and now we can pick up our purl stitch. So we jump over, give yourself a lot of neck, and then pull it through. And now that's our new active loop. So we're going to go down, and we're going to pick up. I feel like I did something wrong. Let's see how it looks when I'm done. Maybe we'll go back and fix it. I feel like I skipped one. So if you do it wrong, yeah, something's wrong. Look there. See how I have those two stitches right together? I ended up skipping one somewhere along the line. So let's go back down. So don't be afraid to do it wrong because it's always a good chance to fix something. See right here, I have two knit stitches right in a row. So see, I did that wrong. Okay. He wants to help. Right there, enter that active loop. Okay, so I'm going to pick that one up as a purl. Pick the next one up as a knit. Pick the next one up as a purl. Try not to drop any more stitches because we don't like fixing them, right? Next one up as a knit. And then that last one will be picked up as a purl. Put it back on our needle before anything else happens. All right, so that's how you do on either either garter stitch or like a seed stitch situation. You would pick it up that way. Any questions about that? Good.
I was going to say, general question, not specifically for this class, because I think it's a little bit too advanced, but this would be sort of the same method you would use for brioche knitting, but then you have to be careful to get that extra piece of yarn. Hi, kitty cat.
Yes, he's very helpful today.
Cats are so helpful with fiber crafts, aren't they?
He loves it. Okay. So see right here, you can see I split my yarn. So one way you can fix that is just take it off the needle, and when you put it back on the needle, just put all the strands back on without allowing it to be split. Double check and make sure it's not twisted, and then you're ready to go. Okay. We're making pretty good time. So once you learn how to fix all these mistakes, then you actually become in charge of your knitting instead of your knitting being in charge of you. So it is practice these.
Ooh, Darren, actually, if we could go back to the garter stitch for a minute. Mara had a good question about how do you tell in garter stitch whether you're picking up as if you were making a knit stitch in stockinette or as if you're making a purl stitch. So which side that bump ends up on.
All right, so let's drop down and look at a couple. All right, so find your active loop here. And it looks like, if you look here, so that one, that's a purl right there, because you can see, I hope you can see that. That's a purl. And so the stitch right above that is a knit. So the stitch that we dropped right here must be a purl. So if we're going to pick it up as a purl, and you pick it up the same on if you're doing stockinette stitch or not, if it's a knit or a purl. You give yourself a lot of neck, you jump over it, and then you pull back through that loop. Okay. And now if you look here, you can see that this is a knit stitch, and this loop, this bar that we're going to pick up is coming out of that knit stitch. I don't know if you can see that very clearly or not. There you go. So we're going to, it's in a knit row. So that tells us it's in a knit row because there's the knit stitch, the loop is coming out of it. And so we're going to pick this one up as a knit. Back on, and then look what happened. My needle fell out. So if your needle falls out, just quickly before anything else happens or goes wrong, just slip it back in. The nice thing about knitting, people feel like with knitting, if your needle falls out or if you drop a stitch, it's like the knitting is spring-loaded and it's going to automatically self-destruct and start, you know, unwinding and unraveling. But that's really not true. So if, you know, you don't have to worry or be in a panic if you have to do any of these things, because really, especially if you're using fuzzy yarn, it doesn't really like to unravel very well. So you have to kind of force it to. Okay. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. All right. So a little bit about reading your knitting, how to look at your knitting and see what you're finding, what you're looking at. So we all know how to tell the difference between a knit and a purl. So if you isolate that one stitch right there, that's our knit stitch. We know it's a knit stitch because we can see all the V's and they all look the same. So these are all knit stitches. And then if you look on the other side, you can see that they're purls. And one way to tell that they're purls is, as silly as it sounds, they're not knit stitches. So you have two choices, whether they're knits or whether they're purls. You look for the bumps, and that's going to tell you if it's a purl. And you look for the more texture involved, and that's going to tell you if it's a purl. So being able to tell the difference between those stitches helps you to sort out if you've made mistakes or not. And then also just looking back over your work. And of course, this one is a complete mess. So any questions about how to read your stitches or identify a knit and a purl or like a twisted stitch or anything? Any questions? You understand the twist? I feel like the twisted stitch is kind of hard to demonstrate on video. So I just want to make sure that you can see the difference between a twisted one and a proper stitch. I think we're almost to the end.
I think we're good. Yeah, we're moving right along today.
Moving right along. All right, so this next thing I'm going to show you, I've actually never had to do, but it's a nice trick to have in your tool belt. So I'm just going to slide all these stitches onto my needle just so I can get to this next point. So let's just say that you were working on a project and you found a mistake like down here. And if it's a bigger project than this, so let's say you have like 300 stitches, it's maybe a big baby blanket or something, and you found a mistake down here and you don't want to unknit that far back because it's too much work. And you don't want to just take your needle out and unravel it because that doesn't make you feel safe. So there's a couple of ways that you can go about it. So one thing to do is if you're planning ahead and you feel like maybe you're starting a new technique and you know you might make a mistake, one thing you can do is get some yarn in a similar color to what you're working on, and you put it on a darning needle. Darning needle seemed to be here. I just had it a second ago. But just put this on a darning needle, and then you would take that yarn and just go through each one of those stitches, leaving it on the needle like that, but it would go through all the stitches. One recommendation is you can use dental floss because it won't leave any fuzz behind, and it's easy to work with, and it's something people have around. And then if you continue on knitting, then like say it's called a lifeline, you put your lifeline in there, and then the next section of your work is something new. Maybe you're doing a lace panel, maybe you're doing Fair Isle, you're going to have like a running horse or a snowflake, or maybe you're starting a cable pattern and you know you might mess up. So if you knit all the way up here, realize, oh, you've made horrible mistakes, you can rip your work out, take it off the needle, rip it out, and when you come to this string, to this lifeline, it won't unravel anymore. But we don't always plan ahead. So what I'm going to show you now is how to put in a lifeline after, and that will also be very handy. So what you want to do is get a knitting needle that's smaller than the needle that you're working with. Doesn't have to be this much smaller, but this was one that was just handy for me. And what you want to do is look at your stitches, and this is where it's very important that you know the difference between, that you know what a knit stitch actually looks like. So we're going to be picking up the first leg of each knit stitch going across. So like that is the first leg. That is the first leg. So we'll start on the very edge when we do this, but I'm just demonstrating what we're looking for. You don't want to get off track and pick up, so that's the knit stitch right there because it's a V. You don't want to be looking at this shape like an A, and that is half of one knit stitch and half of the other one. So you don't want to kind of lose track of what you're looking at and pick up that, because that's not a V, that's an A, it's an upside down V. So it's half of one stitch and half of the other. So you want to make sure that you're looking at it correctly, okay? So you go to the side, and the side stitches are always a bit of a challenge because, you know, they're kind of curled and they always kind of stretch out of place. But you find the knit stitch that's right next to the side one. So there's our knit stitch. And then that's going to help us identify the one on the very edge. So if you kind of tease it around with your finger and kind of open it up like that, you can see right here, that is our knit stitch. So it's kind of easy to find the couple ones that are couple rows in, that are couple stitches in, and then that will be a clue to help us find that one. And then what you're going to do is you're going to pick up the first leg, you skip the second leg, and then you look for the V and you pick up first leg of the next one, you skip that, pick up the first leg. And if you do this correctly, it's a beautiful thing because when you rip out your work, your stitches will be on a needle and they will be all facing the right direction, not twisted, and you'll be ready to start over. But if you do it wrong, so if you do it right, you kind of see how they all look like they're facing the same way, they're leaning the same way, and they're all spaced out the same. But sometimes it's easy to kind of get off. So you might go to the next row up. Maybe you start looking at those A's and you start picking up the wrong leg. And so what's going to happen if you pick up the wrong leg? You're going to end up with twisted stitches. And you might not be paying attention. So I'm going to show you how, kind of what happens in a situation like this. That way it would give us a chance to fix a few things if we need to. So now I'm back on track. I'm picking up the first leg of the V. And then again, the edge stitch is kind of hard to see, so just do your best. All right, so clearly there's some mistakes. Mistakes have been made, right? Because you can see right here, and it's kind of on an angle. But if you're working with sock yarn and your stitches are very tiny, you might not notice those mistakes. So what the situation again was, we've made several mistakes up here, and we wanna rip back, but we don't wanna risk losing these stitches because we don't want to start completely over. So now we can take our knitting needle away and we're going to frog our work. And it's called frogging because you rip it, rip it, rip it. So I'm going to rip it, rip it, rip it, rip it until I get down to that lifeline that I put in. And if we did it right, if we were careful and did it right, then it would have been perfectly on my needle, ready to knit those next stitches, that row again. But I wanted you to see what happens if you do it wrong. So now is a good opportunity. So you know how to unknit, right? So we're going to go ahead and work across, and we're going to unknit if we need to. So I'm just going to transfer the stitches onto my needle if they're correct. Split my yarn there so we can fix that. This one. Okay, so this one looks good. Wait a minute. Nope, it looks good. It's not twisted. This one here. Pick that one up before it drops. Okay, so now here you can see this is where I switched rows. I kind of went up on the row. So take that out. See, it's in the complete wrong stitch. And now this loop, pulled out too soon, so I'm going to put it on. So this is why it's kind of handy to know unknitting. But again, I've never had to put in a lifeline like this after the fact, but it's a good trick to know. Have you ever had to do this, Claire?
Whoops. had to find my mouse again. Yes, I actually just had to do this the other night when I decided that my sweater was too long and I needed to rip back a couple inches.
Okay, so it does come into play. And then when you start knitting again, you just want to kind of pay extra attention when you're knitting this next row that you didn't twist any stitches, that your stitches are all positioned on the right, facing the right way on your needle. Okay, so that's pretty much everything that we're going to cover. And if we have any questions, I don't usually finish early, so it's pretty remarkable. Do you want me to go over anything that we covered you might want to review on? Any questions?
We did have a question about ripping back to fix cable stitches, but I figured we don't have a swatch for that ready today, so maybe we'll think about a more advanced mistakes class and cover some of that.
Yeah, I'd have to have a cable knitted to basically the same, exactly the same. So you'd be picking up the knit stitches as knit stitches and the purl stitches as purl stitches. You don't want to twist your stitches. The hard part, of course, is when you come to that cable twist, you just kind of follow it back. Look at the cables next to it and just make sure you're twisting the cable in the right direction as you're fixing it. So you basically, the stitches would just travel under another row of stitches. And again, if you do it wrong, you can let it unravel again and try to fix it again until you get it right. So, you know, if you've got a big mistake, there's nothing to lose.
Exactly. Debbie asked to see unknitting again, or tinking.
All right, so I just finished knitting that row. Remember, my work is in my right hand and my empty needle is in my left hand. And I want to unknit this because for whatever reason, I made mistakes. So you always unknit starting on the right side, moving to the left. So you can hold your work right under that stitch you want to unknit, pull your working yarn to open that window, and you don't want to be too aggressive with it. You don't want to stretch out your work. And so that's it. So hold your work right under that stitch and then pull your working yarn and you can see it opens that window. And then always, just remember, always go front to back and you won't have a twisted stitch. But if you do have a twisted stitch, then you'll be able to recognize it and you'll know how to fix it. Okay. Does that help?
Yes. Oh, and could we see it, how to do it from the purl side and how to make sure that your stitch is getting in there on the right orientation?
Let me quickly get to the purl side. So always remember these rules when you're unknitting. Always go enter the stitch front to back, knit or purl, and you're always working or unworking from your stitches start on the right and they're moving to the left. So that's knit or purl, these are the rules. And if you follow those rules, you won't have any twisted stitches. And if, again, if you do have twisted stitches, you know how to fix them. All right, so here's where that pesky end stitch. So find the stitch and hold it there. And you can open that window and go in, front to back. We're going to unknit or unwork the purl side. Okay. So again, starting with my work in my right hand, my empty needle on my left hand. So that's not how we normally do it. Hold your work right under the stitch you want to unknit. Pull the working yarn, open up that window, and you're going to go front to back through that stitch right under it. Unwork the stitch, and then position yourself to do the next one. So hold your work right under that one you want to undo. Open that window, and then you're going to go through the window front to back. Through the window front to back. And I forgot to mention, I always forget to mention, today I'm using Hometown Bonus Bundle from Lion Brand, and it's available on michaels.com. So if you want to use this yarn, it's really nice to practice with or to make projects with because it's a nice big thick yarn and it's easy to work with because it's not overly fuzzy or it's not hard to work with at all. So that's how you unpurl. And this is the yarn I'm using today. Hometown by Lion Brand, and it's available on michaels.com. Any other questions?
I was gonna say, we do have some. They're coming in quick here. A couple folks wondered that, I think it's particularly when they're working in stockinette, one side of their work is tighter or looser than the other side.
Like,
Well,
sure.
For me, it's because that when you're working back and forth, it's likely that your knit stitch is a slightly different tension than your purl stitch. And some people, it's really different. And when you're working in stockinette, you can see that like the purl rows are taller or shorter than the rows that you knit. And that's going to affect your end stitches too. And one side will tend to be looser or tighter. I think for me, it's my knit. The rows I start on knit tend to be a little bit tighter. It shouldn't be that bad. If it is a big difference, you can try using different size needles to work each row. But that's only if it's like a really big difference.
That sounds like an extreme situation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
My mistake, so just pick it back up.
I was going to say, Donna has a question that's probably better suited to like fixing mistakes 201. She's asking about repairing a knitted blanket that has a hole in it because the yarn broke.
There are a lot, I do fix a lot of those. So that's more of a darning technique. If there's a hole in it, you can fix stuff like that with duplicate stitch. There's a method called Swiss darning where you actually weave, and if there's a large hole in your work, when we dropped this down, we saw those bars that we had to pick up. But if there's a hole, then those bars will be gone. But you actually put yarn in, so you remake those bars, and then you find the active loop, and then you pick those bars up as you go. But you have to kind of attach the bars, pick it up, attach the bar on each side, pick it up, and then you can secure the other stitches as you're attaching the bar. It's really hard to explain. It would have to be demonstrated, but it's called Swiss darning. So just look up some darning techniques and you might be able to, it's knitted fabric. Once you get a little practice with it, it's actually easy to fix. And if you have the same yarn, it can almost be invisible.
All right, let's see what other questions we had here. While I'm looking for classes, I just wanted to let everyone know we do have 2 more coming up in September. We're off next week for the holiday, but coming back on September 14th, we'll have knitted hats for beginners. And then the following Monday, September 21st, we'll have crochet hats for beginners. And you can sign up for both of those at michaels.com/classes. We did have a couple of people asking about a class on knitting in the round, which we taught a while ago. I think the video should still be available. They're only on michaels.com for about 30 days, I think, so.
Okay, maybe we'll repeat that again if people.
We might, yes.
We could repeat. I recommend knitting in the round though. Definitely try to watch some videos and learn how, because it's very helpful.
Yeah, yeah. And our previous, oh, yep.
If I can jump in, because I did see some questions in the chat about previous videos. Michaels does house the videos for a very long time. Once you go to michaels.com/classes, click on a red button there that says view more videos, and there is the YouTube channel where there's everything for years and years you can check out.
Oh, there we go. All right, even better. I was going to say, someone apparently had a question about mistakes in the round, but I didn't catch it and I can't see it here in the chat. I think it may have been if they're switching between knit and purl, either alternating rows or in the same row, and you end up with a hole.
Yeah,
And that's, I was going to say, well, that's probably because when you switch from knit to purl, either in the same row or in the round in a continuous spiral, you need to move your yarn between the two needles and not over the top of one.
yes. But if you do that and make a mistake, that would be a good opportunity to use your unknitting to go back. It doesn't matter if you're knitting flat or in the round. All these techniques are the same. So you can unknit to create or to fix those mistakes, because it'll make it, you know, the knit stitches are shaped the same and purl stitches are shaped the same whether or not you're knitting flat or in the round. So once you master these techniques, then you'll be able to fix mistakes in the round or however you're knitting. So, okay. I saw somebody asked if I had a YouTube channel. I do not have a YouTube channel, but I am on Instagram and on TikTok now. So maybe Claire will put my Instagram in the chat. And if anyone has any questions, you can contact me, send me a direct message on Instagram, and I usually can get back to people pretty quick. I usually look at it pretty quick. So if you have any questions as you're going forward, just let me know and I will be able to answer them. So it's Mr. Woolly Bear, so it's M-I-S-T-E-R Woolly Bear, all spelled out, and the same on TikTok. So, all right, anything else? Any other questions?
Well, we've got a few minutes here, so I'll pop the handout for this class for fixing mistakes into the chat one more time in case people need to grab that.
Yeah, the handout is really helpful.
Yes, make sure and save the chat before you leave the video if you want to keep a record of all the questions and answers. And the recording for this class should be available on michaels.com/classes tomorrow afternoon. Oh, and our next classes, yes, September 14th, knitting hats, September 21st, crocheting hats.
Yeah, so in the knitting hats, there's actually a really quick brief review of knitting in the round, how to get started. So that might help you if you don't have any other experience knitting in the round. It might be helpful. So, okay, just practice. The more you practice, the better you'll be with it. Just practice as much as you can. All right, thanks everyone. See you in the next class.